I want to thank you for allowing me to come today. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank my wife for coming with me. She's retired now, so she can do that, and it's great to have her. I also want to thank you for your support of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship of Georgia. Churches like yours, strong, vibrant churches, give a part of your income so that people like me and on my staff can help other congregations, particularly smaller, struggling congregations, learn what it means to be the presence of Christ in the world. And so you do a mission work through your giving, and I am extremely grateful for that. And I'm also honored to be here today to speak to you. Our text for today is a very familiar one, taken from John, the 14th chapter, verses 1 through 6. Jesus is speaking, and so I want you to listen. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house are many rooms, and were it not so, would I have told you that I go there to prepare a place for you. And if I go there to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto me, that you be where I am. For you know the place I am going. And Thomas said, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Holy wisdom, holy words, and we say, thanks be to God. Well, I was 4 years old. It's really hard to believe it, but I actually was, at one time, 4 years old. That's why I have great-grandchildren. All my grandchildren are great, by the way. And I'm standing on the corner of the front porch at what my older siblings call the old home place, the place that all 9 of us were actually born in, the house, without a doctor, I might add, bless my mother's heart. It's somewhere between Washington, Georgia, and Thompson, Georgia, out in the woods, so you can understand if you know where Amity is. It's not on the map. And I'm standing there on the corner of the right corner of the front porch, and I'm watching as they back the truck up to the house. My dad and my mom and my sister and my 7 siblings, 7 brothers above me, and I'm the baby, and I'm standing there watching it. And they're loading things. They start off with the heavy iron bed frames, and they load them onto the truck. And then the big feather mattresses. You remember those mattresses that a little 4-year-old could jump on, and it would just swallow you like it was your grandmother's arms? I remember that warmth. And the pillows, the feather pillows that my brother Glenn and I used to fight each other with lovingly. And then they went out in the hallway, and they got that oak stand, the stand that sits in the corner of my den today, the only memory, the only symbol that I have of this old house. And then the porcelain basin and pitcher that was on that stand, they took it too. The pitcher that we used to pour water from to wash our face and hands when we came out from the outside. And then they went into the kitchen, and they got that old cast iron stove, that heavy thing, the one that had the big reservoir on the side, you know, that heated the water. It was the only source of heated water we had in the house. And then they made their way into the dining room, and they got the dining room table, which was really an elongated picnic table with a bench along the wall. This table was so big that all 9 of us could sit at it at one time. We could be seated at one time. And then, of course, they got the oilcloth that was on top of the table. It was a red and white checkered oilcloth, and I can, till this day, I can still feel the texture of it. Right now, I can feel what it felt like for a little boy to rub his hand across it. It draped all the way to the floor. It was a beautiful thing. And they put that on the truck, too. Now, I should have known that something was up, because the week before, they had come in a different truck. And they had gotten the mule and the 2 goats and the 2 pigs and the chickens. And they had taken them away. And I didn't quite understand it, and I should have figured it out, but I just didn't know. And then finally they put me on the truck. And they went down the road about 3 miles and got off the pavement onto a dirt road, another mile or so, and they turned left at a mailbox. And they went about a quarter of a mile back into the woods, and there was another house. And it was pretty much like the house we just left. Of course, I didn't know at that time that my mom and dad had lost the farm, the family farm, to economic depression, boll weevil, a number of things, bad investments, planting crops that died and didn't make, and they had lost the farm, and my father had to hire himself out to Mr. Claude Harden to be a sharecropper so that we would have a place to live, and I didn't know that. But they took me off the truck when they got there. They put me, interestingly enough, on the right corner of the back porch, under the chinaberry tree, and I stood there out of their way watching them. And they took the bed frames off, the feather mattresses and pillows, the hall table with the porcelain pitcher and basin, the cast iron wood-burning stove with a reservoir on the side. They took it off and put it in the kitchen. And finally, they took that table, that big, long picnic-type table with the long bench and the red and white checkered oilcloth, they took it off and put it in the new house. And I stood there and watched them, and I began to put two and two together. And my bottom lip began to quiver. And a tear welled up in my eyes and trickled down my face on the left side and touched the corner of my lips. And there was a kind of a primal utterance that came up in my chest, and I could not contain it anymore. And I said to the top of my 4-year-old lungs, I want to go home. I want to go home. I just want to go home. They tell me that I disappeared for about 4 hours. Now, they weren't really worried because, I mean, what could you do out in the sticks like that to hurt yourself? But after a while, around lunchtime, my dad got concerned, and he got in the truck, actually, and drove back toward the old home place, thinking that his spunky little 4-year-old son had hightailed it back home again. And it wasn't past me to do that. And, of course, my older brothers, they fanned out in the thicket behind the house in the woods. Maybe I had wandered off, they thought. Finally, I think it was my brother Gene, found me. I had gone into the dining room, and I had crawled up on the bench along the wall underneath the oilcloth that draped to the floor, and I had cried myself to sleep because all I wanted to do was go home. Well, it's been about 60 plus years since that day. And I've come to understand that we all share this one thing in common. Maybe we share a lot of things, but we certainly share this in common. When you peel back the layer of our lives, we're all just trying to find our way home. We're just trying to find that place where we're loved, where we can be loved, and where we can give love. That place where we're wanted and we're accepted. That place where we can find meaning and purpose and hope and joy. We're all just trying to find our way home. It shouldn't surprise us. I mean, it's in our literature, our movies, our theater, our books, our drama, our poetry even. This idea of finding our way home. Some weeks ago, perhaps months ago now, I preached in Edison, Georgia, and I'm coming back to Macon at 9 o'clock at night, pitch dark, that lonely stretch of road going toward Albany, then to Macon, and I'm trying to find civilization on the radio, so I'm punching the dial. I have an old car, it still has a punch radio dial on it, and so I'm punching the dial, trying to find civilization, and I land upon public radio station, Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion. And of course, the little clip that was on that night was the lives of the cowboys. You know the story. You've got Dusty and Lefty, the two main characters. They're always on a cattle drive out in the Midwest, and at night they take the saddles off the horses and put the blankets out near the campfire, and they sit there and look up at the stars, and they talk about life and love and God. And occasionally they go into town and talk to the ladies and have a sarsaparilla. They were Baptists, by the way. They had a sarsaparilla. But they come back to the campfire. And most of the time what they talk about is being at home on the range. They're two cowboys. They're philosopher cowboys. And they're home on the range. You know the old song that we were taught as children, home on the range, where the deer and the buffalo roam, where ne'er is heard a discouraging word, and the sky is not cloudy all day. If my mother was still living and standing here today, she'd tell you that was her view of home. I mean, how many times did I hear her shout to the top of her lungs at her 8 sons, would y'all please just get out of the house and leave me alone and let me be at home? Give me some peace and quiet. That's what my mother thought of as home. Home for her was that. Now, that was not true for Dorothy Gale. Remember Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz? Oh, her life was anything but pleasant and quiet. And no, she lived in a topsy-turvy world. I mean, she felt like her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, her adoptive parents, didn't understand her. She felt like the farm hands didn't appreciate her. And she knew the lady down the street didn't like her at all, and certainly didn't like her dog Toto. And Dorothy lived in this kind of topsy-turvy world. It was as if a tornado had come into her existence and taken her to an unconscious place, a place that you and I called Oz. And there, she meets three new friends: the Tin Man, the Straw Man, the Lion. And what do they all share in common? What are they after? All four of them are trying to find their way home. They're told that if they go to the wizard in the Emerald City, he will lead them home. But when they get there, they find out he's a charlatan. He doesn't even know how to get himself home, much less somebody else. But the good witch teaches Dorothy how to click her heels together, and she finds her way back in Kansas. And what does she say when she wakes up from that unconscious state? She says, "Home is my own backyard. Home is my own backyard." And she's glad to be back home, and she never wants to leave again. I can certainly understand that. I live in a little neighborhood in Macon, Georgia called Hugoton Heights. It was built in the 1890s, 1900s. It went into disrepair in the 60s, and now it's coming back again. And we've invested our lives in that place. We have sidewalks and front porches, and people sit on those front porches and sip iced tea and other things. And they love each other, and we care for each other, and it's a wonderful place, and it's home for me. It would take a lot to get me to move from that kind of understanding of home. Now, for Miss Carrie Ward, was in that movie called The Trip to Bountiful. She was played by Geraldine Page, who I think got an Oscar for that role. It's a wonderful movie, and if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. But Miss Carrie is a 70-ish-year-old lady who's living in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, with her son, whom she loves, and her daughter-in-law, whom she tolerates. Her lifelong ambition, for the last 30 years, she has been begging them to take her back to her hometown of Bountiful, Texas. It's only about 40 miles away, but they give her excuses, and they feel that she's too fragile, and that and besides that, they know something she does not know. But she's determined to make her way back to Bountiful, Texas. So she saves up her Social Security money, and she buys a bus ticket, and she sneaks out of the house. And she gets within 10 miles of Bountiful, and the sheriff pulls the bus over. And he comes in, and he gets Miss Carrie. He's been alerted by the son that she's escaped. But this time, in his infinite wisdom, the sheriff takes her the rest of the way to Bountiful. And he pulls off the road, through the field, up to the little grove of pecan trees where there's 4 or 5 houses. And he gets Miss Carrie out of the car, and all of a sudden, she realizes that Bountiful, Texas is no more. The trees are falling on the houses. The front porches are sagging. The windows are broken out. Some of the houses have hay stored in them. Everybody is either gone or dead. All her friends are gone. And Miss Carrie, all of a sudden, is faced with reality that her home, the home that she longed to go back to, the home that she was hoping for, doesn't exist anymore. You know, as I travel the state and talk to congregations, I find that this is a good metaphor for where we are. I mean, we had a great ride from 1900 to 1950 or so, and Bountiful was a good name for what we did. We were bountifully blessed. But now the world has changed. The sand has shifted underneath our feet. And we find ourselves sitting on the front porch of 1950 trying to figure out how to live in 2015. It's a tough challenge. And Miss Carrie has to face it. What would this 4-year-old boy who dances inside of me still, what would he tell you today if he was here? What has he learned about this desire to go home? Well, he's learned that the destination is not all there is. The destination is important. Make no mistake about that. But the journey itself is equally important. The journey itself, the actual life that we're living matters. Have you ever taken your kids or grandkids or your great-grandkids to a trip, and 2 hours outside of Macon going toward North Carolina, they start saying things like, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And if you're a good parent, you pull the car over to the side of the road, get off the interstate, and you roll down the window and say, "We are here already. Look outside. Look at the trees. Smell the roses," because we're always there. We're there in every moment. The journey matters. And you know what matters most about the journey? Who you choose as your guide. Who leads the way on your road, on your journey, on your trip? Who shows you the way? Who shines the light in the dark places? Who helps you understand what's happening to you? Who helps to interpret the agony and the ecstasy of life, both? Who helps you stand up when you fall? Who gets you back on track when you go astray? It matters who you choose as your guide. What matters is not just the destination, but the journey. And what matters about the journey is who you choose as your guide, who leads you along the way. I received some help from an interesting place. It's a song by a lady named Kate Campbell. Kate Campbell is the daughter of a prominent Baptist minister. She is a strong supporter of CBF, and she sings occasionally at our meetings. She lives in Nashville. I think she must be in her 50s now. She has an amazing ability. She can see an object along the side of the road, and she will see the face of God in that object in a way that I just am amazed at. She can see an experience. I mean, some of her songs are really interesting. Like she has one called "Jesus and Tomatoes Coming Soon." You got to love that song. Or she's got one called "Funeral Food." You got to love that song. But the song that I love the most is called "The Way Home." And it's about a garden down in Alabama that she sees. And she sees some signs outside this garden. Listen to the words, because it can help us understand this text today. This text where Thomas says, I don't know where you're going, Lord. And Jesus says, I am the way home. Have you ever been in the Richmond jail with no one there to go your bail? If you've lost your way, it might help to know Jesus is the way home. If you're trying to put that whiskey down and you realize you're losing ground, you don't have to walk that road alone, because Jesus is the way home. It doesn't matter where you're at or how you got there. He knows all that. Just let the good book be your map, because Jesus is the way home. If life's not going like you plan and you feel that no one understands, there is a friend who will show you how to go, because Jesus is the way home. There is a garden down in Alabama, not too far south of Birmingham, painted signs and crosses by the road. One says, Jesus is the way home. This little 4-year-old boy that dances inside of me still, he wants you to know that he's not crying anymore. Not those kind of tears. He's not afraid anymore. Not that kind of fear. And he is not angry anymore. Not that kind of anger. Because he's come to understand that the destination is not all there is, but the journey itself is what matters. And what matters about the journey is who you choose as your guide. And with the right guide, you will find your way home. At the end of the movie, Miss Carrie is sitting on the front porch. The sheriff has been talking to her and kind of reminiscing with her. And her son drives up. He'd been alerted by the sheriff. He drives up in the family sedan. And he gets out of the sedan and walks over to the front porch. And he takes his mother's hand and gently leads her back to the car. And the very last scene of the movie, the car drives through the field toward the roadway. And the director does something wonderful. He has the orchestra play a hymn. It's a wonderful hymn. And we're going to sing it. Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling me home, calling us home. See on the portals, he's watching and waiting for you and for me. Come home, ye who are weary, come home. I tell you, There is a garden down in Alabama, not too far south of Birmingham. Painted signs and crosses by the road. One says, Jesus is the way home. So, if you want to find your way home, if you haven't found it yet, this is a great place to start, this church. And this hymn that we will sing will help you